E. Cummings certainly was for sale, like a lot of us writers. His main problem was that he couldn't always find a buyer. So in 1935, when he was already a pretty well-established poet, he couldn't get his next book of poetry published. He sent it out to 15 publishers, and he got 15 rejections. And so he borrowed $300 from his mother, published it himself, 1,000 copies, titled it No Thanks, and dedicated it to the 15 publishers who had turned it down. And of course, I hope they're a little embarrassed now when they read that dedication. So in writing about E. Cummings, the thing that really surprised me about him was his intense faith in the benevolence of the universe. This was a guy who really thought that if you behaved yourself and you were classy and elegant and generous and kind, that you would be taken care of. And there are a lot of stories about this. There's a collapsible top hat story. There's a story about a letter he wrote to my father, John Cheever. But the story I'm going to tell you about this tonight, I think, is the most shocking of these stories. So here goes. It starts in 1919 with the birth of Cummings' only child, his daughter Nancy. Now, Cummings was having an affair with his best friend's wife, and his best friend was also his patron, Schofield Thayer. And that may sound a little wild, but in Greenwich Village in the 1930s, people did things like that. So Schofield Thayer went off to Vienna to be psychoanalyzed by Freud, and Cummings and Elaine got it on. And then she got pregnant, and she had the baby, but they pretended it was Thayer's baby because that would be easier for everyone, they all thought. To his amazement, Cummings, who was a little bit of a baby himself, fell in love with this baby. He loved this little girl, and as the baby grew, he got more and more interested in her, spent more and more time with her. He wanted to be her father. He got Elaine to divorce Thayer and marry him, and he then adopted his own child. So the three of them, Elaine, the little girl Nancy, and Cummings, had this very weird, unconventional ménage à trois, and they were very happy for quite a while. They lived in France for a while. Elaine had a ton of money. They lived in New York a little bit. They lived in the Cummings place in Silver Lake, New Hampshire, and everything went pretty well until about 1925 when Nancy was, say, 6, and Elaine fell in love with someone else. Frank McDermott was a man who thought that poetry was silly and that the past was not to be talked about. And so Elaine talked Cummings into giving her an annulment, because Frank McDermott was also extremely Catholic. And Frank McDermott took over Elaine and Nancy, and essentially Cummings saw his daughter less and less, and finally he didn't see her at all. He hired lawyers, he bought a gun, he did everything he knew how to do about this, but Elaine and Frank McDermott were able to whisk Nancy away, and Cummings didn't see his daughter for more than 20 years.